Welcome to a new episode of Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work to get more content out, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as the most recent, Bringing Out the New You to Play in the New World, along with our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and is also in the description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As more of us come together who are creating shifts in themselves, the more effective it will be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
Well, welcome everybody. Get to get together again and to play some more. I am flying solo, so that's the reason that I have to kind of shift from one position to another to get things started. So anyways, welcome to another episode or part of episode 19. This is part 3 where we are addressing questions that have come in and that we've kind of accumulated. And we did quite a few on part 2 and we did quite a few in part 1, but there's still, 60 plus still remaining. We're going to do whatever we can today, and then whatever we don't get addressed, which I'm sure there will be quite a few more questions that we cannot get to, we'll schedule another period where we will address other questions. Now, we also have an intent to kind of create a podcast, which we'll be rolling out very shortly, that we'll take 1 or 2 or 3 questions at a time and just cover those questions, and we'll just plug those in at different points in time. That will be additional to the 3 times a week that we're doing right now for, periods up 2 hours plus. So that will be added in as we go along the way. We're just working out some of the details to be able to do that and do it in a much more efficient way. So anyways, welcome to be part of this part 3 of episode 19, where we continue to play with the different questions that have come up and we have collected. One of the first questions that came up that's been played around with some clarity around the different stages of planet Earth, how things were implemented, who was responsible for various role-playing that have, brought us here we are for the 4th time to be able to be playing with those energies and those programs that, we are experiencing and that we're in the process of transmuting. So as I mentioned, this is the 4th time this has been introduced. The first time was introduced where there was not another race. That race was actually created and supported a certain way, which I'll go into detail. So I'm planning to do a complete separate episode on that one because there's like about 4 questions that we are planning to combine. And as we combine those 4 questions, I can do a topic about it. And it's really about the origins and how things are coming out and how we can actually see how it's playing out now and the transition that we're going through. So I'll cover that one at that point in time. One of the things that other question that came up is that how impactful are we on an individual basis? And I know I covered bits and pieces of it at different times along the episodes and so forth. One of the things that is a concern for many people is that they're looking at, all the stuff that's being presented as a rollout. the fact of, being restricted, being the fact that we'll be mandated and all of that stuff. And they're saying, okay, well, here I am. I'm not giving power to that. And like, how can I step into a particular role that will allow me to be much more beneficial and effective in that regards, where I can be much more hands-on and helping with the changes that are taking place. And that's a fair question, and a lot of people would like to be involved in one way or another to make the changes. And right now, if we understand the depth of it, how it actually works, is that whatever realizations that you are having within yourself, whatever you're now shifting from because let me bring this into context here. As long as we're in the inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D way of life, basically everything that we've constructed up to this point in time and still are giving a lot of power to, then the capacities for us to transform anything is next to impossible, because at that point all we're doing is supporting the existing operating system, the existing narrative, the existing agenda, if everybody wants to call it that, what is already a construct. So we're basically looking at that construct. For us to be able to facilitate in shifting from that construct and to be very instrumental to break down that construct, and when I say break it down, is making it unstable so that it can go through the transitional aspect of it, then the only way we can do that is actually creating a shift within ourselves. And this is why it's so instrumental, everything that's being shared and everything that you're being exposed, everything that you are experiencing within yourself, energetically, consciously, the transformations that are happening with your body, the transformation that's happening in your mind, the transformation of the connections that you may have, and so forth. So all of those parts are coming into play at this point in time in a very powerful way. So for us to be able to become much more powerful, guess what? Then we have to actually go into that natural state. And this is a transition that we're going. Now, of course, the numbers of people that are involved going through that transition, that have already sustained a certain energy and continue to grow into that energy, that consciousness, that transformational component of themselves, which when we look at the transformational component of ourselves is actually breaking down all our operating systems, our belief systems, and all of the things that we adhere to that represented that old world, that represented the current operating system that is being slowly broken down and destabilized. It's really taking it out of our system, because since we're all connected, as we're going through all of that, you're going to see very powerfully that is creating openings to all of it, and it's also streaming 20,000 to 1. Meaning that every individual that is going into this frequency has a capacity to negate and transform 20,000 of its opposite. And when I say its opposite, it's in that lower state of frequency. And one of the things too is a lot of the very high powered and self-dominated powers that they've taken on, playing various roles that have been restricting us, they're still part and parcel of us and are contributing to those changes. But ever they cannot be sustained, because the energies and what we're going through is putting them out of work, sort of thing. But it's not even so much to work because that's what they needed to do. It's actually allowing them to upgrade themselves so that they no longer have to create that powerful state. So by going through the changes and the changing of the way we process things, the way we see things, the way we feel things, the connection that we have, the access of those higher frequencies that are coming through us and are changing every aspect of ourselves, the access of use of higher consciousness, which is organic 3D and organic 5D and beyond, that is already not only changing ourselves, but it is streaming all over the world in a very powerful way to create new activations, transformations, and so forth, and transmuting a lot of the denser and more locked up energies that we've had, that, on a collective scale has been not only supported, but has been so ingrained that we haven't been able to to step out of it in any fashion that would be of ease. So now that we're looking at all of this, when you understand that these changes that you're going through is facilitating the collective, to another degree that I want to share with you, there are people in different positions right now that can be considered leadership or crucial roles. I'm not talking the elites at the very top, and we're going way, to a smaller portion than the 1% per se. Because even the 1% are just basically all different stages that are not fully in that. However, the ones that are in different positions, it can be governmental, can be in different states right now, have already gone through a bit of a transformation with them and an opening for them to be able to receive instructions from us. Instructions from us for them to start shifting their role, which impacts the world. So you're going to see more of people that have been rigid in their operating system, that are in governmental, medical, educational, and all of these other stages, right to the military, you name it, on all of these levels, including financial, that they are receiving the instructions we're sending it. But the only way we can do it in a very powerful way is in a very appreciative and loving state. If you're demanding change because you're not liking it, that is not getting in. That is filtered out, and it's actually just reinforcing the old. You cannot have any judgment. You cannot have any, categorization of good, bad, right, wrong about the whole thing. But through an appreciation and love, you can say, okay, we're not going to support the vaccine. We're not going to support all of these new technologies and so forth, which I'll cover a little bit more of the technologies in one of the episodes to kind of explain how the transition of the earth at this point in time has occurred and what the roles were at that point. However, that we're not accepting these restrictions. We're no longer accepting these old modalities. We're no longer accepting dictatorship. We're no longer accepting the fact that we're not having the capacities to be creative in the sense of contributing to create a new society, a new world, a new way of experiencing that is more natural for us. So what you're doing is that with that love, you're basically saying, okay, we're not supporting this. This is what we desire. This is what we feel in our very essence. Then that goes in and stimulates already the codes that are within them. And I'm talking about the ones that are in different positions. We're not talking the very top, because the very top basically at this point has no receptors that are active. However, they require tremendous amount of energy to keep them going. And that energy is very low energy, low frequency, which happens to be all based on fear, survival, and so forth. What we call the reptilian brain, which is kind of really, it's the ego operating system that creates that illusionary projection, because even our brain, or what we call our mind, is very powerful, and it does not say, okay, we have to be in this fight or flight or anything of that nature. So they require that to be going. So their juice starts to reduce, and it's already been reducing for a long time. And then there's been a lot of interference energetically because of all these new energies that have been coming in, and the frequency from the sun, from Gaia, from us, and so forth. So they're becoming more and more depleted. And some of the rituals they were able to do has also been removed, because there's certain individuals that have gone in and cut certain supplies where they can stimulate. Plus the fact of, it depends on us how we're changing and how much we feed that. So it's the ones below that and the different tiers that are in different positions at this point that have those openings, because they're not total hybrids. They're basically active in the sense similar to us, but they are, have locked in very deeply in those programs. But there's been openings that are happening in there. So you're going to find certain individuals in certain levels of government and so forth that are starting to see what people are requesting. And we're not talking to people that say, oh, save us, protect us, give us whatever, because we can. That's the false illusionary part that is being sustained to a certain degree for the ones that want to play there. But it's us, the ones that are saying, you know something? We are now instructing you with a 20,000 time force without, force, what we consider as force as, conflict, but with a really high powered frequency of us saying, we're now instructing you to shift your role to support where we are going. We are on this playground of organic 3D and organic 5D and organic matrix. We are these beautiful crystalline bodies that we were originally from, that we are reactivating within ourselves. We're also looking at changing the whole chakra thing system, eventually eliminating completely, reactivating our DNAs and so forth. But that's part and parcel of some of the process that's going through. But we're basically giving them instructions. So even the mandated, so vaccinations and whatever else, just to use that as an example, you will find some of the leaders right now are saying, no, we're not allowing it. Why? Because many of us have been saying, we want free will. We want no mandating of anything. We want to make our own choices. We want to use our own choices to experience ourselves in physical form. That we are not to be told how to operate. We're open to receive information, but information that is accurate, information that has been proven, rather than certain narratives and agendas and propagandas or anything of that nature. So that's what we're doing. So when we're looking at it, for us to get into that neutral, 0 point, love state, and then instructing an opening of a new world, or really activating and utilizing the new platform that we're already on, that was introduced and brought in already from last year. So at this point, you wouldn't believe how much capacity we have that. And this is why it's important for us to align together to be able, at this time, to come together and really, instead of going into competition, which is kind of the part of that old narrative, of coming together and really shining in the sense of clearing out your programs that relate to the old world and really activating that true essence, and then saying, okay, this is what we are calling forth. Now, is this an imposition or imposing anything on the masses? No, we're not, because the masses itself may be in the depth of that state of programming where they are, still supporting in a very powerful way the inverted matrix, the inverted 3D, 2D state of being, and, the addiction of being in polarized, addiction of being in low vibration, addiction and being in survival and all of that stuff. They're from a higher perspective on physically, human entities, soul, mind, are saying, we'd like to be out of it. We're going to hold this space because it's harder for us to move out of it. But yes, whatever you are suggesting, we are in agreement. So we have to understand that the ones that are on the forefront and moving forward, we're kind of the opening of the pathways of what they're requesting, even though they're not representing and experiencing it because of the heavy programming, heavy conditioning, heavy default, and all of that. So it's not like you're saying, okay, I'm going to take it away. And this is why the two platforms were created, the organic 3D and organic 5D, so that even the ones that want to play in the organic 3D, which is a complete massive upgrade from the 2D inverted 3D component and inverted matrix, because both of them will have the organic matrix involved, that they have that opportunity, but to go from that to this and then to this, and others go straight to 5D. So just really to understand, and these are basically dimensional consciousness, source, essence, consciousness being expressed and experienced in form. Again, different dimensional consciousness, third, fourth, fifth, and up. Okay, in this case, third and fifth, and then up. Their experience that, that level of consciousness and accessibility is there, but it's all experienced on different planets, different ways, in different physical forms, because each form has certain characteristics of how it could operate. So each one's going to experience it differently. So yes, go through the changes, and in that peaceful state saying, okay, give the instructions that we are prepared to really bring forth. So you're basically, if you have a certain governmental level and whatever else, you can connect with them, go into that meditative state, bring them in front of you, present them in front of you, and say, okay, we're ready for this. Let's bring this to that level where we are no longer in that old method. This is what we'd like to see. So all this mandated stuff, all these, microchipping, whatever else that was being projected, or, the fact that we're, representing a certain polarized state, we're no longer supporting and allowing it, and we are requesting for you to come into alignment because we are now facilitating for us to go through those shifts. So that answers that question. I think there was like 2 or 3 of them that were very similar to that. So I decided to lump them up and cover all of that, because there was a concern about, how can we make an impact? How can we make the changes if we're just, we're not going out there rallying with thousands of people? You'll notice that there's more and more people coming together, speaking out, and they're not protesting in this old sense of protesting. And, there's already been signs where at certain places where they've gathered, even the so-called police and so-called security people have actually put down their shields and whatever else and joined the people, because they're realizing that they're part of it. Whatever they're reinforcing affects them and their family and everything else. And they, we've already been saying, listen, we're not supporting this. And they're coming, because of the openings that I was talking about, they're also receiving that information, and it's opening their heart, it's opening their mind and saying, what are we doing here? We're all in it together, which would have been very difficult to see, because under so-called mind control, or what was represented to that, they couldn't see that. But now that even that's opening up, so that in fact it's not as governed and wrapped down and locked down as it was before, because everybody's being affected one way or another in a very powerful way to go into that realization. So, it's really to keep it in mind that we're making progress and we're doing it in a very powerful way together. And this is the thing. And just because there's a less number, a smaller percentage that, have been getting it and seeing it, does not mean that we're not affecting. We are in a very powerful way, more than we can even imagine at this point in time. Like even the examples that have occurred at certain points in time where a group of people, thousands of people gathered together and meditated together, had already created such a powerful field throughout the whole planet that violence and all of the other chaotic things that were playing out had subsided tremendously. Even, the case of murder and whatever else that was playing out at that time, all reduced. And people were actually reacting less. They were actually seeing each other more as an equal, rather than an imbalance of saying, I have to get theirs to feel good about myself or anything of that nature. So you could see all of that as it was playing out in those examples, because those are real examples. They've been monitored and documented in a way of saying, yeah, it is impactful. So this is kind of the same thing, but we're doing it as each individual of us that are going through these processes right now. The interest to understand the mechanics of how things work and so forth have really escalated. And this, the stuff with the lockdown has actually given us time, even though the narrative was opposite to what we are experiencing, it was very powerful to either experience the polarity of fear and whatever else, and at the same time give time to reflect, to connect, to really access ourselves, and also to expose ourselves to various resources that actually allowed us to really ingrain within ourselves what we already felt and knew and have been being stimulated for some time. So let's go play together. I just wanted to say, since we talked about meditation, or I mentioned meditation, we have a meditation this Saturday, not tomorrow, the day after, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And that meditation, I will put up the thing afterwards, near the end, that we are coming together to activate even further transformation at this point in time. And as many of us that come together. Now, it hasn't been posted because somehow we were having an issue even with Facebook. We couldn't even post today's event until later today, or this morning, actually, a few hours ago, because somehow it wouldn't accept it. We tried the day before and we tried yesterday, it just wouldn't accept it. So anyways, it just kept kicking it back out. So anyways, it changed today and it seemed to work today, so we posted it. So later today I'm going to be posting about the upcoming meditation. Okay, so let's carry on with our question. So the next question that we have, ego death, false identity, ego aspects, the voice in our in a head. What can we do to clear it? Too loud, keeping in the head all the time. Ego is very powerful, and it does affect us in a big way. I just wanted to let you know, as I said in the beginning, I'm flying solo, so I can't see your comments and I can't see your questions. However, we'll review it afterwards, or I will review it afterwards, and or Kimberly, and when she's back. And then she will look at the question and we'll plug it in, and either we cover it in the podcast or we're going to cover it in another episode where we'll go through all the questions. Now, some of them, because of their biggies, that we'll actually build a whole episode on it. Anyways, so regarding the ego death and false identity. Okay, so how do we take care of this voice that we have? Well, let's put it this way. It's like anything. I give the example that I've used before, where if you have a nagging kid, right, and you're irritated by them because they're always requesting, they're tugging on your pant leg or your leg or whatever it is. I want this, I want that, whatever it is, right? Now, if you're going to say no, 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 and you're going to be in conflict or fighting because the demands are there and the request is there, but you're entangling or engaging in it, okay? Say no, not now, and you're in that convincing mode. No, I don't want to do this, and whatever it is. So just to bring clarification, if you're going to be in the state of saying, no, you can't have it because of dinner, because of this or that, or whatever it is, you're engaged. So you're creating this, in a sense. There's one will and there's another will conflicting, okay? So the ego is very much like that. So if you have the child, back to that example, if you go to the child, they say, listen, you can take any tantrum you want, you can scream all you want, you can pull all you want, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's not changing anything. We're not dealing with it. That's it. And you're in the neutral state. You're not charged. You're not fighting it. You're not trying to convince it or anything like that. The no is no. We're not playing there. We're not going there. And it doesn't matter what you do. And so that it will scream louder, do whatever it is. The ego does the same thing. It wants your attention. It wants to distract you. It wants its will. What's its will? To keep you distracted, to keep you in the polarized world, to keep you in lower frequency. It creates one story after another, using all of your resources from your subconscious mind of everything that has been either labeled, defined, or it puts a new label on it if it needs to. Anything that it's seen, any programming, conditioning, any exposure, what it sees other people. And it will do that. So it's going to be incessant in your mind. Now, I'm not saying everybody feels it the same way, but for most majority of people have gotten so used to that they feel that that's them. Okay? However, when you're starting to go into the aware state and noticing the ego versus your higher self, because you've got 3 levels of consciousness coming to support you. You have your body innate consciousness and what it shares attached, and that's supported by Gaia. You have your human entity, which is all of human incarnations of all the different stages, that's sharing its wisdom and consciousness and so forth. And you get your soul's consciousness coming in. And meanwhile, this one little software that's in your mind is creating all the story, but it tends to be loud. Okay? It's like the example back to the kid that's having all these demands and taking a fit or whatever it is, or coming after you with one story or another to get its way. almost to the point you're negating everything around you, and there's only one individual. So in that state, you're saying, no, I'm not putting focus here. I'm going to be present with everything else that I have here. I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I'm following my own heart, what I'm doing. It doesn't matter what you're demanding. I'm not giving power to you. So with the ego, it's going to continue doing that. The last thing you want to do is fight with it, try to convince it, or anything of that nature. You don't want to be in the point of feeling irritated because the ego is saying what it is. So it's very powerful to go into that observer state. And what does that mean? Is that you're now hearing that dialogue and you go, oh, very interesting. What else can you come up with? And you're not getting engaged. You're not getting emotionally charged by it. You're just receiving that whatever it's going. And you say, well, you know, it doesn't matter what you say, how you say it, how you're going to present it, what is playing out for you. I am not going to comply. I'm not choosing to support you in this case, because I am choosing now to shift from whatever you've been sharing all this time to an internal knowing. And then, of course, it's going to come back and say, how can you trust it? How do you know? I've been here protecting you, keeping you safe. I'm the one that's been letting you know what's going on. I've notified you how many people have been taking advantage of you or whatever it is. And you say, well, it doesn't matter what you have to say, what role you've played. I thank you. I acknowledge your services. I acknowledge everything that you've done for me. And it doesn't matter how it played out. I appreciate it. I thank you for those experiences. I thank you for every part of it. And I love you for it. However, I relieve you of your responsibility. I relieve you from being very active in this journey as we move forward. So by doing that and remaining in that neutral, calm state, because you're not going to fight with it, you're just making a statement from a core essence of who you are, the combined part of you, which is the mind, the soul, the human entity, and the body, and all the supporting energies around that. You're coming from that point rather than the stories that the ego mind is continuing to stream. So you're doing that. Thank you, I appreciate you, I love you. However, I release you, I free you, I clear you, I let you go. And then you're going to have to do that every time it comes up. And you'll notice, if you don't give it attention, you go into the observer state, like observing a child that's taking a tantrum. You say, hey, listen, you can do whatever you like. You could say whatever you like. It's not changing it. We're still going whatever we're going. And that's the same way you do it with your ego mind. And you'll notice, through my own personal experience, through many, many people that have done it, that gets quieter and quieter and quieter, because it finds that it doesn't have the same effect. It does not throw you off the path the same way it was able to do so before. So all of that starts to change. And what happens is you become rewired. You start to rewire in the sense where you're no longer taking the same amount of input from what the ego is saying at the mind level. So the software may be active to a certain degree, but it's not taking that input and using that as its reality creation. It uses more of the other inputs, because the mind, let's talk about the brain, the right brain, left brain. The right brain is constantly receiving information, not only from your body, from your human entity, from your soul, and from your third eye, which is connected to other souls and other expressions that exist, not only on planet Earth, but on other planets. Okay? So it's receiving all of that input. That's why the right brain is very creative, imaginative, and it takes that information and it actually transmits it over to the left brain. The software of the ego is in the left brain. It doesn't reside in the right brain. It's in the left brain. So it takes the information and tries to skew it as much as possible to create the old reality. And in a way, it has a lot of power into it. That's why at times when the analytical brain comes in, the analytical is very powerful. The left brain is required for us to see what we see. However, that's where it was implanted, that operating system, that software, to be able to manipulate what we see, how we feel, how we experience, and so forth. And when I'm talking about that, that's emotionally, and that's in reactive, and that's in calculation, and it's the shaping of our reality around us, who we engage with, and so forth. So really is putting the focus on what the ego is saying and just observing it and say, you know, I hear what you're saying, I acknowledge your presence, I acknowledge your statements, and I acknowledge your stories or whatever you've been saying. However, and I appreciate you, I love you, however, I am relieving you of your responsibility, and I'm not choosing, at this point, from this moment on, I'm not choosing to use what you have to say as part of my creation. And as you do that more and more, it gets quieter and quieter. You can actually see even the thought forms. This is another thing you can use. Even the thought forms that may come up. You know, what about this? Just see that thought form coming in and just imagine, oh, thank you, and let it go. Put it out in the field. The field is source, okay? As soon as you put it out in the field, it's gone. It actually goes back to pure light, what we call pure source essence. So just as the thought comes in that is ego-based, you can feel it is very different. It's very low vibration. It's very similar to what you've been getting. Just see yourself, oh, thank you, goodbye. I mean, I had to do that myself years ago. I remember just as the thoughts came in, I just imagined like file folders and throwing them out. I know that's not as common today, but just put it out in the field. Goodbye, see you later. And that's how you do it. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Practice with it. And don't give up on it. And don't fight with it either. Just practice with it. And as you do it, it gets quieter and quieter. If we're afraid of the ego, if we're going to see how powerful it is or anything of that nature, then guess what? It's going to have in the reshaping or shaping or supporting of your old reality. That's kind of how it works. So if you don't give it power, then it goes out. All right, so many people are many people prepare for flash from the sun, others waiting for weather disaster. Is any of it going to happen? Okay, well, we're constantly getting corona releases and flashes and so forth. Are we going to get a blast that's going to shut down everything at this point in time? That is a probability. It is as a option, but it has not been decided in any way, shape, or form to support that to come through for us. The fact of weather in a disastrous way, it is, as much as it had the potential and was one of the options, in all of the simulations that have occurred in testing it out in the alternate worlds, that it always created much more fear, much more survival, much more, and it actually dwarfed or created a somewhat of a reversal process. So right now it is not beneficial in any way, shape, or form, so it's really not on the table. So the fact of, you know, wiping out all technology, wiping out all electronics, and going back to the Stone Age or anything of that nature is not supportive at this point in time. However, certain bursts of it may affect certain technologies if necessary. Right now, it's not aimed at that direction at this point. Having massive weather, very destructive. They're only going to be localized as required as a stimulation along the way through the different areas. As you've noticed, there has been a lot less of it going on because there's already enough to stimulate with all of the stuff that's playing out right now. So can we say that's going to be something that's going to be necessary in any way, shape, or form? Right now, there's no indication that we would even exercise that any longer, even though it was part of the potentialities from a long time ago. So if we're looking at that, you know, it was really to actually support the old inverted matrix, the inverted 3D, 2D type of state of mind. Because, I mean, any massive disaster has two components of it. Yes, people go into reactive mode, but then there's people coming back together to kind of support each other. But the old pattern was to go back to that self-destruct mode, which is not conducive. So what we're experiencing right now is, in a gentler way, creating the environment for us to make a shift within ourselves without having any of those things come into place. Okay, do souls, entities choose an extreme experience mostly because they were trapped in a karmic game and they believe that they have to pay the karma? Okay, souls are not trapped. Human entities are not trapped. It's an agreement that's made. Now, the agreements that are made, the choices that are made, are to come in and play very specific roles. Those roles are specific, and the roles are I can't think of the word now. It does move. It changes. Okay. Okay. Transitional. All right. So whatever role it's taken on, the soul or the human entity does take on, it is what it takes on from that period of time, and then moves along. The whole thing about karma, that applied for anybody that was born before 1987. At that point in time, a soul would say, okay, we have a karmic, and I'm going to have an episode on karma anyways at this point, so I'm not going to go into too much details. But at that point in time, the karma, and it's always been that way, is to create a balance. Not that you had to pay the price, not because you played a negative role and now you got to play a positive role and experience a negative role, because that's kind of how it worked. It's like, okay, I was a bad guy at that point, now I'm going to be a good guy, but I'm going to be affected by the bad guy because that way I can experience the opposite side. And that was kind of an experience that the souls, the human entities, and even the physicalities at that point in time were utilizing when that was applicable. That has been removed since the end of 86 going into 87, when we had our first stage of transformation that we went through, so that the whole necessity of playing that role was not. So the souls will come here and take on a certain extreme experience for various reasons. They're going to experience it because it was something they wanted to have the experience that they haven't had or didn't complete from a previous incarnation. The other part of it is that, okay, it would like to clear out any past experiences that may have had and have made those choices. But it also wants to be in an instrumental position to experience that and then go through a transmutation, a rewriting of that experience. The same thing with the human entity and also with the physicality. However, it can choose at any point in time to say, okay, I'm done with this. And then instigate changes that occur. The whole idea is that we were stuck and that, those extreme parents, because we were paying a price, that's never existed, ever. It was a concocted idea from the inverted matrix, what we call an inverted 3D, 2D type of thing. It was just an idea that was implanted as that we have karmic negative. Because when you're looking at from source design, we will play what represents as a negative and a positive role at different times in different incarnations, sometimes all in the same extreme of life or life stream. So that was kind of what was utilized as an opportunity to kind of experience both sides of it. But that became a restriction because we decided that we wanted to fast track things because we were so far out of alignment with our galaxy's evolution and the evolution of our solar system and our universe that it was, okay, we need to shift this. So it was agreed upon by the souls, the human entities, and the bodies to eliminate this whole balancing thing. So even if you came in before 1987 and you came in with that operating system, it got wiped out by the end of 86 going into 87. That convergence cleaned it out. So that's no longer there. The need for polarity was gone. Even the operating system, the satanic operating system, was actually cleared out as a necessity to go through. So all of that stuff got cleared out. However, we still supported the idea that this existed. The reason it was cleared out is so that in one life stream, because in the past, and I will get in more details in another episode, in the past that each incarnation, you would actually, whatever role you took, you kind of carried it out throughout the whole, that whole life stream with very, very little variance and changes. Now, to expedite things very quickly, we can change from all sides very quickly so that we can wrap things out. So even if we came in with a certain agreement to play, those agreements are all flexible. The actual fact that there are no more agreements that are rock solid anyways. Everything is negotiable, everything is changeable, everything is dissolvable. And that the reason is that so that we can move forward very quickly and not, so we could have played a negative role and now all of a sudden we're in a positive role, or what we is a positive role only to bring it back to a neutral role, which is the role that is, 0 point neutrality, oneness, and all of that in itself. So yeah, there was nothing to pay back or anything of that nature. I basically just wanted to have that experience, learn from it, understand the human experience, and then go through a transmutation. Anything that's been carried over from previous lives, especially when we got to the second stage in 2012, it expedited even further, and now in 2020, I mean, stuff moves through very quickly. So there's not even the importance of looking back in past lives or anything of that nature, because none of it means anything, because those are old experiences. Whatever lessons we've learned, whatever awareness we gained, whatever may have played out at that point in time, that's all it is. It's just stuff that we experienced, but we advanced accordingly because of it. Okay. So are we trapped? No. Souls have the freedom to come and go. Souls have the freedom to actually shift it. Now, a soul and a human entity will work with the physicality, with the operating system, and also with the ego, in the sense, when I say with the ego, to diminish its capacities and its effect, or the way it governs everything, so that we can move forward. Now, a particular soul may get to a point and say, okay, I don't want to, this is taking longer, there's so many other agreements in place, I no longer want to support this. So that soul can leave. Another soul can step in, or that soul can leave, and if it's beneficial for all the other components, can leave in such a fashion where the body is actually put out of the equation and goes back into Gaia's energy field. The human entity goes back to the collective human entity and can choose another incarnation, and the soul will leave and go into non-form and decide if it wants to reincarnate at any point in time on planet Earth or any other place else. So it's never trapped. Now, sometimes it may feel that way because it is committed to make a progress, a move in a powerful way, and then finds that everything, the operating system, the ego, the construct of it, that it's so ingrained, all the components of it, that it may find it a little bit more difficult to move through it. But this is the reason that we are being supported in the ways that we are, where all these energies are coming in, all these stimulations are coming in, the deconstructing of those rock solid patterns that we had before are also breaking down. Okay. Whew. All right. So the next one, could you give me an example or examples of soul planning on an extreme experience? What kind of guidance does that soul receive? Do they receive extra support from their soul family, guides, angels? Are they usually older souls or younger souls? Okay, well, in regards to when it chooses to come and participate, a soul's choice to take on, first of all, it has its own freedom to choose. However, it does work with its oversoul. It does work with its twin soul. And when I say work, communicate, share, look at potentialities and so forth, but it also looks and communicates with the souls that are already on planet Earth. We're just going to talk about making a choice to come to planet Earth. So they will have the guides, they will have the angelic realms that are involved in saying, okay, we need some key instrument people at this level of consciousness to go in and play that particular role. But it starts off with the role maybe very in a denser environment, an unconscious environment, so that when it goes into those states of experiencing, that you may find it challenging, and we'll be there to support you and so forth. The choice of the parents, the choice of the input from the parents, being the genetic codes and the lineages and whatever else, and the support from, that you'll get a particular soul at that point in time. So there's a lot of involvement and support. And when I say support, it's like guidance and help direct it. So it's not a soul just gets dropped and it's like, okay, what do I do? Now, there are souls that are quite a bit advanced. And when I say advanced, these are souls that have already gone through a lot of layer removals. They're already working at higher dimensional consciousness and so forth. Sometimes they'd be referred to star seeds and whatever else. But I'm just talking about souls that have already been around the block many, many times and may have a good familiarity to the human condition and experience, that they, don't require as much input and support from all of the other aspects that it's connected to. Now, you have to understand a soul, whatever experience it's going to have, does affect the whole, what we call the oversoul and all the souls that are connected, including the twin soul. So this is why they do participate, because in essence, it doesn't want to go into a state where it's going to find it very difficult to navigate, very difficult to go through the different stages. So it will guide and also will make arrangements for their input at different times. We'll make arrangements for other souls to come in, participate at that point in time in a different incarnation, a different physical form, and so forth to participate. So there's quite a bit of orchestration and unification and assistance that goes on. So you're not really kind of dropped and left alone. The ego mind may interpret it that way at times, especially when we're embodied, but as for the souls being older, younger, souls, depending on choices it makes, what path it goes, what agreements it makes, can be a soul that hasn't had many lives, but already exemplifies a higher dimensional consciousness, because not all souls start very low. Souls start at different positions, and so when they're talking about an older soul and a younger soul, it's basically how much experience it has, how many veils is it removed, and how much access to its sourceness it has, really. So it varies along the way. There have been souls that are brand new, like baby souls, if you want to call it that, in a sense where it has never incarnated. And there's some on the planet right now that is for the first time incarnated, anywhere, So it has access to the source consciousness of it, but it does come in with a certain amount of veils. But the veils are a little bit more transparent in a sense where it be able to, because it's difficult to put a soul into an environment like playground we call Earth, because of the fact that of the impact of all that restriction and separation and so forth that we experience. So it may be very difficult. So hopefully I guided that. So there is a lot of support, there is a lot of interactions and so forth. Okay. How can one not feel betrayed by their own soul, not feel like their soul has planned something against their free will? Okay, that's a good one, because when we're asking free will, what level of free will are we talking about? Because there's several. There's the free will of the body, there's the free will of the human entity, there's the free will of the soul, and then there's the free will of the mind, but which is a combination of all of that. A lot of times the free will, or not believing that it doesn't have any free will, is the ego. That's an illusionary component about it. It's a tool it uses, feeling that it's disempowered, that it has no say, that others have a say, and so forth. The soul always has a free will, the human entity has a free will, and the physicality has a free will. Now, how it chooses to express itself and experience itself in its combination, because all of these parts are, it's very rare that you're going to get the same body or same body consciousness, and you're going to get the same human entity and the same soul coming in another embodiment. It's always changing, because that's the only way it can create openings and reconstruct things in a way to move forward in a big way. So the ego mind is going to very powerfully project that it's been betrayed. I don't have any free will. I want this. I'm not getting this. I want to go play here. I want to go do this. I want to do that, whatever it is. And all the other parts are saying, no, we have other things that we need to do first of all. Second of all, we have agreements to experience certain things. We've come here to learn and experience every part of it, and also transmute it. And we may have, certain souls may have, or souls or human entities may have very specific requirements to make an advancement in certain areas to facilitate the whole. So it will work together to construct that. But the ego is saying, no. The program is power, wealth, playfulness, having, abundance of people playing with me and whatever else. And I want all these sensorial experiences. I want freedom. I want this. I want that. Or the fact that says, well, I want no challenges. I want everything to go smoothly, playful, whatever it is. And Meanwhile, I'm not feeling that. I feel trapped. I feel this and that. This is the interesting part about it, because there's a double-edged sword, if you want to call it that, because the ego plays both sides. First of all, it says, I want all this stuff. And a lot of times it's creating all the restrictions of the stuff. The only reason your body, your human entity, your soul would restrict any part of any experience at this point in time is to keep you on track. Keep you on track so that you can experience all those polarities, so you can dissolve all those polarities, because it wants to really come to do more fully what it came here to do. The combination has a purpose. The ego mind's going to say opposite. So the ego mind's saying, we want all this stuff, but then it also plays the role of blocking it, because that way it keeps you distracted. That way it keeps you swinging back and forth. So that's the one that's going to say, I have no free will. Meanwhile, it is governing most of your experience. It's interesting how all that plays. So it's just getting a deeper understanding of that. So if you feel betrayed, that's the ego. It's that operating system. Right, wrong, good, bad, fair, not fair, light, dark, all of that stuff that it's going to present. And it's going to play both sides. Even though it works in a very low frequency, it works both sides, because it creates the distraction, it creates the confusion, it creates self-justification of one side or another. A lot of times when we feel, I should do this, then I shouldn't do that. If I do this, this can be wrong, or that we do have a certain experience and then we label it as something good, bad, right, wrong, or anything of that nature. It's all ego. It's all of that. Because the soul, the human entity, and the physicality is not going to say any of that. Now, the physicality may turn around and say, okay, we don't want to be exposed to all of these so-called substances and whatever else, food and whatever else of these lower frequencies, because I'm upgrading my physical aspect of my operating system. I would like something that would be more supportive in those higher frequencies so I don't have to deal with it. So it may present itself shifting from what it used to like to, or not what it used to like, but what we've been programmed to like, to something that matches it. Same thing with the human entity. Human entity is, okay, we want to clear out all of this other stuff that in the what we consider the human experience to be. So I want to be shifting in a very powerful way. So let's bring all of this into to place so that we can move forward. So it's really that whole thing. We all have free will. We have free will on so many levels. It's just an illusion that we do not have free will. Now, of course, the illusion is also in conjunction to that is looking at it and say, okay, well, I don't want to be experiencing this life. I don't want to be in there. But that part is still ego, because at the soul level, human entity level, is saying, or even the physicality is saying, this is our playground. We've come here to do some very powerful work here. We've come here to transmute all of this. We've come here to be a contributor. We've come here to really express in a pure way. And this is the playground. We chose to connect here with this playground. We chose to be part of this playground. So then guess what? It made the choice. Every part of it made the choice to be part of it. And that's it. To see that in the way it is. So it's not really outside of your free will. You have free will. You can say yes, no, or anything of that nature. And we already do it even without saying yes or no. Okay or no. No, we're not even saying it, because we already feel that intended in every aspect within ourselves. And that's how it works. Okay. Can a soul wind up in an extreme experience from making bad choices here and not listening to the inner guidance? Our soul chooses an extreme experience. Will it receive inner guidance to steer the soul, the entity, the body from it? Well, okay. The experience, the dance of life at this point in time, yeah, it can get, can make certain choices to kind of take you down a certain path. But we have to understand, every choice we make depends on the state that we're in at that point in time. It depends on what program is operating within us, what beliefs are there, what we give power to, and what experience we choose to have. And so when you actually see all of that, when you see how all of that is playing out, then we'll go into that experience. We'll have that experience, but we can transition every part of that experience. So can we make a bad choice? No, that's not possible. We can make a choice that may reflect a lower frequency, a lower state of being that may seem like very polarized or anything of that nature. But that making that choice gives us that experience and gives us the opportunity to make a new choice moving forward. So feeling that you get stuck with that, with all of these choices that we feel are bad choices, which is just the ego's interpretation of it, and a lot of the ego will direct you that and then judge the choices that you made. So is the soul going to be facilitated, or your whole experience being facilitated? You're facilitated all the time. The human body with Gaia is communicating much more than before and very clearly. So is your human entity, so is your soul, but you also have inner guides. We have guides, well, the angelic realms play a small role now too. Even the inner guides are playing certain roles. You have your whole, what do you call, your whole oversoul, oversoul, with all the other souls connected. Sometimes, I get flashes of what I have to say, and then it just slips my mind how to say it. Okay, so we have that whole support of the oversoul. So there's lots of support that's going on, and I did talk about it earlier about it. So in essence, really getting stuck is only to the point that the program is still governing us, but there's a lot of assistance to shift us from all of that. So you're not kind of left to drown. So there are no bad choices. You make a choice that has certain consequences, that gives you a polarity or gives you something that you want to experience, but you always have the freedom to shift it. And the purpose is not to get stuck anywhere. This is why you're getting so much more support. Not only is the energetic support, the downloads of code support, but your soul, all of the components, everything is there to support you. So you have a powerful team directing you, guiding you, supporting you all the way. It's just the smoke and mirror part that the ego may play out, that you feel, you have no support, you have no assistance along the way. That's just kind of the illusionary part that's created within that operation. Why do souls entities carry trauma from the past lives should not get all cleared once they transition? Well, they do now. Some of the ones from before that have been here for a while will carry certain traumas and so forth. However, when we're talking about traumas, it is just a memory that has a label. So maybe something what looked like negative. So you got burned to a stake, for example, for speaking out in a past life, okay? A lot of times those are carried over by the human entity. Sometimes it's carried through the lineage. Sometimes it's carried from the human body. Very rarely though. And the soul itself, yeah, sometimes there's something carried over. But when we're talking about this trauma thing, it's from an old perception, an old label that was all constructed from the inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D. Because you have to understand, this inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D, has been playing out for 10,000 years. So it's been there around for a long time. So many other incarnations that we have had may have created. So that's just coming up to be processed. And when I say process, is to apply a deeper understanding from it and then kind of transmute it. With everything that's going on right now, it's moving through us very quickly. It does not require the same intensity and work and focus and deprogramming that it did before, because it's just showing up to be cleared. That's all. It's been showing up for us to acknowledge it, to appreciate it, to apply a different, higher consciousness understanding of the game, because all it was a game, all it was is an experience, and then with love, just put it back into the field, or what we call source essence. Okay, so when we're looking at this, whatever we labeled as trauma is only still being labeled now as trauma because the ego still labels it. So when you're looking at it, you got to see the perfection of that, because it was just a movie, just an experience, it was just a video. Because a video game, if you want to call it that. What we're looking at from a soul perspective, from even a human entity perspective and a physical perspective, from its innate levels of consciousness, it sees everything as just an experience. An experience is an experience. Yes, some of it may have intensified emotions, may have intensified sensorial experience, may have a localized locking in of certain memories around that. But those memories, all of those experiences, excuse me, has then only been labeled and created and plugged in from that inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D, through the ego. It really doesn't have any of that. So the carrying over is really just bringing it up to the surface to look at it with new eyes, new levels of consciousness, new frequency, and allowing it to transmute. That's really what it's going on. And it's moving so quickly now in the sense that a lot of the stuff we wouldn't even look at before, it's coming through. So we're bringing it in through the lineage, we're bringing it in through the family dynamics, we're bringing it in through our soul, if there's any of that stuff. We're bringing it through the human entity and the physicality just for the purging, and at times we're bringing it in from the collective. However, all of them is moving quickly. Now, any soul that leaves now, any human entity that unplugs from a human physicality at this point, even if the body's still around because another one steps in, and the same thing with the physical, all of that is cleared. So anyone that's left and has been leaving since 2012 and have reincarnated, do not bring any of that. All of it is wiped, because the mandate now is to create everything brand new. It's to bring the purest, clearest expression possible. So even a soul that may have had many lives and have not cleared up, and they had a list of things that they needed to address, that all gets cleared out. Before, parts of it would get cleared out, parts of it will be plugged in, some new ones. There were other things that would come in, and in a sense we're saying, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that to complete it. That's not the case any longer. This is all to expedite the movement forward. So any of the souls that are coming in right now are not bringing any of this baggage, really, or past stuff. Okay. Oh, this is a big one. Do you know where we're at? Topic 2, Earth as a prison planet. Okay. We have had Kimberly join us, so she's back, and so she can read it, even though I have it on my screen too. Yeah, you can read it. I can take a break in my speaking while you're reading.
Okay, so this is a whole bunch of topics in one
Yeah,
heading.
we may have to break that up.
Yeah, we're going to. Here. So Earth as a prison planet is the topic.
Okay.
So I'll give you one at a time. Was Earth a prison planet?
Okay. I know there's that belief, and there was a belief that was enforced as a prison planet, meaning that you would come here to play a very negative, consequential experience, and then once you were here, you're not going to get out, and you're going to go into the depth of that. That's how it was interpreted. That was plugged in as a concept, an idea, and as a belief system, that whenever you took on a physical form, or even the human entity, or even the soul came in to look at it, it had that. But that was with the construct of when the inverted matrix, the inverted 3D, 2D, all of that stuff was plugged in, and the ego was plugged in at that point in time 10,000 years ago. So the reference that go back thousands and thousands of years, way beyond, because we're looking at planet Earth as it was here, as humanoids. Then Atlanteans were the series before that, the Lemurians were the series before that, and then we had the reptilians before that. So planet Earth has been reused at different stages along the way. So when goes back to the reptilian time, when there was modifications done at that point in time, which was the first time the Lucifer stuff was introduced as an operating system for planet Earth, per se, because it was introduced to other places too, and other planets before. It really represented that as a prison planet, because all the souls that were coming in were dictated from a very state. But when we look at it right now, it's not. And it has not, but it does feel that way, because we've been experiencing that we really have no say. In fact, that others are dictating. So in a way, you feel like you come here to express, to be yourself, and then you feel like a prisoner because you really can't express. You cannot experience the way you wanted to experience. That's how it's been programmed to look like. It's illusionary, but it looks like, but it's reflective in our reality. And we've been conditioned and programmed to believe that's the case. So it may feel that way. But is it truly a prison planet? No, it's not. It never was, never will be. And every incarnation, every playmate that enters in this realm really has the freedom to play. So it's not a prison planet. And I know that sometimes they were talking about the souls being in prison, coming in. Now, there is a truth to the fact that, souls got addicted. So is the human entity in the physical form, addicted to maintain certain patterns. And when we talk about that addiction, we're talking about saying, okay, I'm going to play a video game. I'm going to give you this as an example. An analogy and an example is that I'm going to play this video game. You just finished losing the game. And you want to just get back in there and play the game because you want to try it again. And then try it again and try it again. And each time you're learning from it, and each time you're trying to go in and get to the next level. And that's kind of the thing. The souls are saying, damn, I didn't make it this time. I want to go back in. So it lines up again and say, okay, I'm going to make all arrangements and prepare myself even more. The same thing with the human entity. Now, that's why the human entities a lot of times carry different life streams with them and their skill sets and whatever else, because it says, okay, I wanted to be a very powerful musician. I only got this level, but this time I want to bring it in and play that role again. I'm just giving you as one of the, the modalities and examples about it. So each time it comes in. So it did get to a point where it seemed like we were just recycling and recycling because it seemed like appealing. I want to get back in there and do it again. Now, even the souls that have thought, and the different parts of thought, I'm not doing this again. I'm not going back there again because this was a horrible place. Once they go through the process of disembodying, and they're not governed by the ego, because the ego will create that illusion and supports that illusion because of the operating system, then they were, oh, great, I want to get back down there. I want to go and play. So it has never been that. Go ahead.
Okay. Have souls entities been trapped in the astral plane by negative ETs?
Well, there are souls that choose to participate and have shifted. Are they trapped? If the soul is in a position where it feels itself so disconnected, because it will create that experience to start off with, and then disconnected from its source essence, and has only a small part of its accessibility, even though it is source, then it can get easily much more convinced of the ones that are playing a negative role. And a lot of times they would choose to kind of experience that part of it. So are they trapped in that etheric part? It may look that way, but in essence, if they wanted out at any point in time, they do. They can, and they do at this point. So can they be trapped? Yeah, in a way, but not really. It's how can I say? It's a compliance that they choose to an agreement that they choose, to participate in that experience. But it's a choice of an experience. But to really live an experience, you gotta kind of feel that you are really trapped there, because the moment that you say no, I'm not going there anymore, then you don't hold that. Go ahead.
Okay. Do souls entities get harmed by nuclear explosions?
Okay, so nuclear energies do destabilize physicality operating system. It does make an alteration to the human entity, and it does leave an imprint to the soul, but does it really harm them in the sense of, that it will not be able to function later? No, it doesn't. Because even if any imprints are left from that operating system because of a nuclear exposure to it, it does get purged. So it does come renewed or refreshed or whatever you want to call it, to the degree it does. So it does not get caught up. Now, the human entity may have an imprint that it may want to clear out at some point in time, but where we are right now, with the energies that are going through right now, it would be very difficult because it would get all wiped out anyways. So in fact, if you were nuked, I guess, at this point in time. The moment you leave the physicality and go through that process of purging it, all of it is cleared. And the same thing with the human entity and also the physicality. Now, the physicality will probably maintain more of that because it becomes part of Gaia, but even the energies of that wouldn't allow it for. So really, nuclear is not even allowed any longer, and it's been made sure that that doesn't happen. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I think you've answered this already. Is the Earth the most polarized playground in our universe?
No, it's not. It's the one that's carried it for a long period of time. There are levels of polarity that have been experienced on other planets that are even more powerful than what we've experienced here. Planet Earth has had polarity in a very powerful way many thousands of years ago. It has experienced it even in Lemurian time. It's experienced it in Atlantean times, and now it's being experienced now. But is it the most polarized? Currently, it's the one that's still holding it to a certain degree, but at the same time, there are some other ones that are still polarized. But those polarization is really not so much the polarization where you actually have both sides of it. It's just like all one side. So it's just one polarity. Here on planet Earth, we're experiencing both. So it would be probably the one that has the most extreme of both sides.
Okay, is the ego program exclusive to Earth?
No. Each ego is designed for each human forms forms that are taken on. So ego itself is an AI. It's an artificial intelligence that runs on a program which it's always been named as Satan as the program name or label that was given. So there's different forms of it, different constructs that have been utilized, and a lot of them don't use it anymore, have been negated and cleared out on different planets. Now, the one that we have here is very exclusive to the basic fundamentals are similar, devolving, keeping very low frequencies, and so forth. So they were only the ego has only been introduced wherever the planets they had what they call the Luciferian operating system that was being used, and the planet was being experimented with that. So there have been other planets that have utilized it, but in majority we're kind of the planet that uses the form that we have, and it is the one that's still active. In a lot of places they're no longer active whatsoever.
Okay, I'm gonna put this one's from the chat, but I think it fits in.
Okay.
How about compromised stargates?
Yeah. When we're talking about what is labeled as compromised stargates, there have been certain stargates that have been kind of put and opened up where we are led to believe that they are carrying certain energies that would be very supportive for us in the advancement, but in fact some of those stargates that were activated actually did the opposite, was reinforcing the lower frequencies, the lower operating system that we're emerging from it. Now, does it have a negative impact? To a small degree, yes. Does it kind of create more challenge? Yes. Does it dwarf us completely from moving forward? No. Because as soon as they are spotted, they are shut down. Okay? So we have our brother sister souls that shut it down, but they're also so-called humans with souls that are advanced with their human entities and their physicalities that have taken the role to go in and spot them and facilitate to shut them down. So there are what you can call, as a way to refer to as negative stargates that were opened up that looked like they were stargates coming from a higher consciousness, but they ended up not being that. That is really no longer even allowed anymore, so that's not really happening. So all the stargates that are opening up are pretty well supportive for us at this point in time. If the odd one slips in there, it gets corrected fairly quickly because we're doing everything possible. It's just kind of transition away from that older part. Now, there have been grid lines and everything else that kind of been affected in certain ways, but those things, there's been numerous amount of people that are, starseeds or coming in with advanced souls and carrying some key codes and have made agreements to be conduits to activate, so reactivate them to their natural operating system rather than the one that was being projected to kind of keep us in that lower state of being.
Okay, how different is Earth from most playgrounds in the universe, and what are Earth's unique features?
Okay, well, every single playground is different. Okay, and I know I've talked about it in workshops. I've talked about it I don't know if I covered it too much in the series at this point in time, but I did cover it in workshops and other talks that I've had over the years. So every playground is different. Every playground is tuned for a very specific experience. Every playground also hosts different physicalities. And usually the physicalities that are going to be the primary physicalities that will be operating there are usually tuned to match the playground. So when we're talking about planet Earth, because of its location, because of its integral connection, is the center of our quadrant of our galaxy. It's like the spoke. Is that how you call it? The core?
Yeah, the hub.
The hub, sorry. The hub, and then the different, then the spokes coming off it, yes. So connecting to a lot of other planets. So planet Earth was designed as a hub. And the uniqueness about planet Earth that was created, pretty well every planet gets retooled, like planet Earth. When they're retooled, they also start off at a certain dimensional operating system with the capacity to upgrade. And usually when the upgrade happens, there is a re-encodement and it gets re-encoded. Everything gets redesigned in a way. Not wiping out the civilization that's on there, but it actually gets reprogrammed. So there's a reprogramming when it no longer serves. So planet Earth was designed when the last incarnational period. Now, the last three each had a uniqueness, like the Lemurians, the Atlantean, and now as humans. Each one were kind of designed to be able to evolve. Now, of course, this one, the planet Earth right now, and that was reprogrammed and basically retooled 15,000 years ago, had a very powerful experimental operating system that was applied to it. And that allowed that this planet was actually self-evolving by the humans that are on there. So when it was designed, it was all organic. So organic 3D to be able to evolve to organic 9D, all organic. The organic matrix that was also involved, and let's put matrix here, was also very supportive. Like a matrix exists, and I'm going to cover this in another topic, another episode anyway. The matrix is the fundamental operating system of the planet. So when it was retooled, a new matrix was designed, organic matrix. Now the organic matrix was also had certain specific links that were allowed to it. So each and every matrix, there's a matrix on every planet because it's required. That's the main operating system. We had an original matrix, organic matrix, but then we had what we called the invert matrix that was applied 10,000 years ago. But the organic matrix that exists for each planet has a certain amount of communication and stimulation and upgrades that they're allowed. So that the planet itself, the matrix, would shape and support the conditions that would be supportive for those incarnated physicalities, those expressions or holographic expressions that were going. However, there was a limit to how much it could upgrade. It was very instrumentally staged. When planet Earth was retooled, with its organic matrix. That organic matrix was tooled so that it would be able to have a certain level of higher level of communication back and forth to all the planets it was connected to. And what planets are we connected to? We're connected to like 400 planets in only our quadrant of the galaxy. So whatever was experienced from all of those planets just kept feeding into our organic matrix, giving us the opportunity to be able to be supported in the different stages along the way. So planet Earth was designed to be able to go from third dimensional consciousness all the way to ninth dimensional consciousness, supporting humanity, and humanity was also wired that way. First of all, humans in the original design did not have what we call chakras at that time, because we were crystal. At crystal, we communicated with all of that. The DNAs, we have 12 DNA strands. The Lemurians, I think I only had like 2. The Atlanteans had like 3. We have 12. What are these DNAs? These 12 DNAs are connected to specific species, and I'll get to that at some point. Maybe not today, we'll see. The 12 DNA strands were connected to different species. And each species was a contributor. Contributor of consciousness, contributor of the experience that they had. So we had not only open to 400 streams of information, consciousness, and codes being streamed into our organic matrix, we also were no longer, we weren't fragmented where we had chakras at that point in time that had individualized communication. It was one unit, which was crystal, which was made up the whole physicality, which had tremendous amount of access of consciousness, access of light codes, access to spectrums of sourceness, and that can tune itself very easily, but also had 12 different inputs from different species that were all individual part of our creation. And that made it a little bit unusual because it wasn't very common to do anything of that nature. So the human experience, this particular series that came in 15,000 years ago that we're embodying, had tremendous amount of resources. So when the changes that occurred and the inverted matrix was plugged in, when the hybrids came in and reprogrammed everything, and the 2D and inverted 3D was introduced, the ego was introduced, which was a software that supported all of this, then the inverted matrix, I better write this down, matrix, became a buffer in between the two, so that we were heavily operating with that. Then the 12 DNA strands, 10 of them, 10 of the DNAs, were shut down. And when I say shut down, the communication channels, the keys were turned off in the sense of the communication. So we weren't getting 10 of the original inputs that we were getting for us to upgrade. The 2 that were left on were gone through filters. And the filters actually cut down the spectrums of access it had. So basically, it's like having a window wide open and just opening up and leaving just a slitter open with several meshes of filtration. That allowed this to become accepted as an operating system. Because to be able to support an inverted matrix, 2D and inverted 3D, and have the software like ego working, you can't have all of this stuff. You could not have the organic matrix still streaming. So it's still there, it was there, I mean, we're in it now, but we were always in it, but the thing is, this was in the middle of it. But to have this fully accessed without anything interfering with it and having all of this active, you couldn't even buy into the idea that you were separate. Or the fact that you know, what we've created as a reality at this point in time as realism could not even stay adhered. There's no way, because you already knew so much more. You had access to so much more. Each one of these would be already showing you the advancement that were made. So the uniqueness was that we had so much plugged in this last retooling that was very unique. And then we have to look at planet Earth. It was seeded with plant life, animal kingdom, oceanic kingdom, reptilian kingdom, bird kingdom, insect kingdom, coming from all different planets. Each one carrying its own innate consciousness, plugged in, playing on our playground we call Earth. Now, of course, a lot of it went through more modification when all of this stuff came into play. And we can get into it in another episode a lot deeper, but it's very, very unique. It was quite an experiment. It was a feat in engineering when planet Earth was retooled. The operating system in itself. And I will talk about all of those, you know, the changes through the world and what Earth and that it's gone through and whatever else, and the retooling at some point in one of the episodes. Go ahead.
Okay, another question from the chat, honey.
Okay.
Lena is asking, we don't need to have the experiences with lower vibrational energy anymore, as astral will be cleared in time?
Yes, yes. You don't have to play with any of this anymore. The need for polarity has been gone for a long time, but we still were caught up in the idea that we have to play with the older frequencies. You can't deny it. So in a sense, you're going to acknowledge his presence. You're going to acknowledge you're going to acknowledge his presence, the role that's played, appreciation and love and everything else. But when you're doing that, you're actually transmuting it. You're actually increasing it. Do you have to fight with it? No. Do you have to entangle with it? No. You don't have to play with it anymore, because the moment you say, I'm not choosing to support that because I'm no longer there, and you're activating that higher frequency, which I've talked about many times, bringing the soul in, home frequency, physical, whatever it is, you don't have to play with any of that. That's all. There's no necessity with any part of it, because even now saying, well, I need to understand it, you already have that. And there's so many examples around you, so you could just observe and you've already got what you need. So the polarity stuff has been gone since '87, the need for it. The operating system of it shifted even further in 2012, the end of 2012 going into 2013, and now it shifted even further. So even though it was being used at one point or another, even to a certain small degree, it's no longer a requirement whatsoever.
Okay, so the next section is about collective souls in 2D. What about collective souls in 2D? How do they plan their experiences?
Okay. The souls that have gone into 2D, in most cases, are souls that are not individualized. So they're not have an individualized soul, and they don't have an individualized signature human entity. The physicality is still part of Gaia with a reduced communication channel. Now, they're playing a role to help humanity advance. The only reason it went into that state because we accepted the challenge, because when it even was presented, it was a challenge to be able to go into the inverted 3D, 2D, 2D, inverted 2D, 3D state of operation. So a soul with a specific signature carrying a certain energy playing 2D is a challenge, a huge challenge. It's like being blocked up in a small prison that you can barely move in. I mean, I'm talking about when you can move. So there was no interest for any souls to take that on. And if it did, it would be a very short visit. So to maintain that operating system, to give that opportunity for us to experience this inverted matrix 2D part of it, then the agreement was, okay, we will assign a soul with a specific signature running, could be hundreds, sometimes thousands of 2D physicalities. And the same thing with the human entity. Now, at certain points, when their role is finished, either it gets unplugged completely so that the physicality is no longer there, or it gets to a point where it's finished playing its role, then it opens it up so that it can actually shift from 2D to inverted 3D to basically organic 3D, and then a specific signature soul may choose to embody it. And the same thing with the human entity. So like Dolores Cannon had mentioned some years ago, that through the work that she was doing, that it was interesting when I heard it, because I knew of it many years before that, but when she mentioned it, I go, yes, being that the 2D actually take on the extra role. So when I say extras, it's like a movie. When you're watching a movie, there's a lot of extras in there, and what the extras do, they make the background. They're the people that actually represent what we see as a collective, but they're not playing an active role where they're the lead role players or the different ones. So they usually don't have any importance of the role. However, they're required to make the movie. They're required to support that video game that we've been playing, or that reality that we're playing. But however, as our requirement is shifting, which it is, then they're also either they unplug or they basically go online and become active in the enlightenment process, rather than just playing a role to assist others to enlighten.
Okay, so the next one is, can they plan extreme experiences?
Yes, of course. They'll plan all types of experience. They can play a very polarized role to push your buttons. They can hold a certain negative energy around. So some of us have family members that are that way, that are, or people that we know, they usually create the stage around you in your reality, depending on the frequency that you're in. They may play a very negative role for you, very intensified or anything of that nature. But, the intent of even the signature soul that's operating that is just there to facilitate so that you can actually shift out of and go into your, your true state of being. So activating more of your soul rather than, so they can play an extreme role.
Okay. What happens when they transition? Is it different from a 3D transition?
I'm not sure if I
when they
understand that.
leave the planet.
Oh, when they leave the planet? Well, no. When the transition happens where they're leaving the planet, they'll seem like they just died, like everybody else. In some cases, they'll just disappear. But in most cases, they'll go through the same process as anybody else. And the souls have unplugged from it, and the human entity's unplugged from it, and Gaia takes that experience back into its essence. Now, when we're looking at a physicality, sometimes the question had come up in the past, well, how does a physicality merge again with Gaia? It's energetically, it's consciousness, everything connects, and eventually it becomes part of Gaia anyways, regardless. So that's so the transition is very similar. It's just the transition may not have an actual soul that goes through the transition. However, their transition, how they transition, is very purposeful too, because if they can play a specific role for individuals that are entangled in it or are playing a role with each other, then the way that they choose to depart will be very much facilitated. In a way where, so if they're going to leave through a suicide and they're connected to a certain family dynamic, they'll create an impact that's necessary for them. But yeah, the transition is very similar, I should say.
Okay, why is there one soul occupying many bodies on Earth when there are so many souls waiting for a chance to come to Earth for 3D to 5D and beyond ascension experience?
Okay, good point. The reason that there is, because of the fact, and I did talk about it earlier in one of the other questions, but because of the role that it's taken on, that role that it's playing, the souls that are coming here are not so specifically the souls right now. They want to be part of either the organic 3D or organic 5D in the organic matrix experience. So the ones that are playing 2D and playing as the extras, the role that they're playing is so polarized, so reduced, that there's no interest for those souls to take those on. Until those roles are played out and it becomes, it can shift, then at that point in time, and who decides it can shift? It's us collectively. The only reason a lot of them are in 2D is because collectively we still expect them to be there, and they're playing a role for the ones that, or us, I guess you want to call it. But once they shift, then there are souls, yes, that are waiting, and that's part of the transition that we go in through. So it's not only just unplugging from the physicality and saying, okay, they died. There's going to be many, many of the physicalities on the planet, humans, whatever you want to call it, that are 2D and 3D, which will embody a full signature soul and a full signature human entity, so that it can pick up the pieces and start experiencing the organic 3D and organic 5D. That's already happening here and there. You've probably have known certain people that are really, really in 2D and seems like now there's nothing home, even if you looked in their eyes, especially when you could see certain people, that all of a sudden they get turned on at some point, and all of a sudden they start to change. They shift a huge way, and then you see that there's this other spirit or this other energy about them, and they make massive progress. And I've seen them myself in different situations, but I'm sure you've come into that.
Okay, the next one, I think we've answered these questions about time for some reason. Do you want to take a look at them?
Yeah,
do you want to do
I'm
them
sure
again
we have.
quickly?
What is time? I mean, time is a measure that we've put on planet Earth. It's a measure. Time, in a sense of chronicle calendar, of hours, minutes, seconds, and so forth, really do not apply, because each planet experiences it differently. And they don't have a unit of measure in the same way. So anytime we're receiving information, they're interpreting it for us so that we have a figure of measure. Time does not move. What's the word? When it's moving along. Linearly? Yes, linearly. It can go forward, backwards, and whatever else. Now we experience it as moving, as linear, and also the speed of it, how we interpret time, because time is interpretation. We're programmed to interpret time, and really what's happening is that there's subtle, and in this case less subtle, much more intensified, changes in alignments energetically. And those changes and alignments represent as change that we experience not only on planet Earth and so forth. Those changes are also seeing cycles that come and go, like weather cycles, or what you call environmental cycles, human cycles, plant life cycles, coming, going, growing, and whatever else. But to measure it, to put a construct to it, we plugged in this idea of time. And then the time was plugged in, because we didn't even have a reference of time until the inverted matrix came in. That was not part of it. What determines how we experience it? Really, it's us. What determines how we experience it is how we interpret time. That's why you'll notice if you're doing something really, really enjoyable, or you get really caught up into something, then you notice that all of a sudden you look and it's like, oh my God, many hours went by. If you're looking at something and you have a lot of judgment about it and you're not liking the experience, then we have a tendency to slow it down, and because it's all experiential. It's not really that we're moving time faster or slower. Now that we're saying time is speeded up, what is change is speeding up. The pulses of energy have speeded up. The way we interpret things have speeded up. And this is why we're seeing that the days are getting shorter, the months and weeks and whatever else are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the years, because of the fact that, things are moving, change is happening very quickly. Because in our mind, we may have a reference of saying each change takes a certain period of time. And even though a period of time is just an observation of a section of stages, where now the stages are compressed, so it looks like time is moving quicker because we're having one change after another, one pulse after another, and so forth. So that's kind of how it's experienced.
Okay, so how do we go from, if everything's happening simultaneously, how do we evolve? How do we go from less evolved to more evolved?
Well, not everything is happening simultaneously as it's been preserved, because the only thing that exists is now, this moment. The past is a memory that we can utilize as a recreation, but again, the recreation is never the same. The future is a projection. So realistically, at this point, when you're really looking at it, there's only this moment that we project an idea of what the next moment or next year, next whatever term is there, but that's just the projection. So we're kind of creating a simulation in our own mind, a simulation in our field of these are some potentialities that we can even look at and probably consider plugging in or not. When we're looking at the past, we're looking at whatever's already happened, whatever labels and stories we've attached to it and whatever, and then sometimes we attempt to simulate it. The inverted matrix, the inverted 3D, 2D really are adhered to that, and that's what the ego operates, because the ego is always taking the past, defining it, and then trying to project it into the future. So when it comes to evolution, evolution is just experience. Evolution is, I'm going to experience these types of scenarios, situations. I apply so much consciousness, which I will apply even more along the way. And as I'm doing that, I am becoming differently active or differently using different resources to create realities. So as the consciousness continues to stream, you're upgrading your reality. And that's how we evolve. Now, the understanding of evolving. So I know a lot of times we talk about, we go into what we get forget. So we forget who we are. And then we go through the process of remembering. So you can look at it and say, well, why are we forgetting and then we're remembering? Are we here to remember? In a way, yes, but that's not really the purpose. The purpose is you forget who you are, because who are you? Your source. Your source. You're the actual essence of all creation, all existence. You're the field. You're everything. For you to have an experience and to test out the different scenarios of experiences and to use your creativity and imagination so that you're not just stagnant, you're going to create realities where you can go and do simulations and experiences. Planet Earth happens to be one of them. There's millions and millions of planets. So you forget, to a certain degree, that you're source, so that you can create an experience. Oops. That doesn't work so well with wet fingers. You create an experience. You create a reality. So you forget, so you can have a simulation of an experience. So you come here forgetting. Are you remembering? Well, what you're doing is you're introducing along the way more memory of sourceness. But there's a difference to this. You're not only remembering, you're becoming more experientially enriched. It's like any game that you play, any experience you have, you're learning from it. It's probably something you've never done before. Let me try it out. Let me see what I can do with it. So source creates the illusion through a signature a signature soul, to have a limited, restricted access to its sourceness, to create experiences, to play within the experiences, and become enriched in those experiences. So each stage, it's learning. So it's becoming more enlightened. You could say, well, from forgiveness to this, we're more enlightened. But remember, source is not stagnant. This process expands your sourceness, expands your experience, expands who you are as source. So that's what the enlightenment process is. You become enlightened, become more aware of who you are, and more experientially rich. Now, this is why you don't only come to one planet, you go on different planets, you take on different physicalities, you're on different dimensions, you're in different states of creation through galaxies and universes and so forth. They're all different levels of playground, all within the field, all within sourceness, all of that. So you're just going to forgetfulness. In some places you forget even more than others, because a lot of times the deeper the forgetfulness, the more powerful it is. Now I wanted to mention something else about planet Earth. I meant to say it and then it kind of slipped my mind. What also makes it different is our physicality has something called emotions, very powerful emotions, very, very powerful, which is a whole body component of it. It's very sensorially enriched, and it has used different ways of communication too and connection, which embodies a lot of extra things that a lot of other physicalities and other playgrounds don't have. Even language is not used as a communication. It's used to create form, but it's not used to communicate, because the telepathic might be there. They may not have all the sensorial experiences and the levels of degree of experiences, sensorial experience. A lot of embodiments do not even have emotions, and which is a full embodiment of reacting and responding to a certain part of it. So I just wanted to mention that since I remembered now. Okay. So that's the enlightenment aspect of it.
Okay, so can you expand on timelines? Can they end, get closed? How do they collapse? Will our reverse 3D timeline end, or will it continue?
Well, it's all collapsed already. Everything's gone. All the multiple timelines, and I did talk about it in other episodes, so some of these questions may have already been addressed. So we're just on one timeline, of course. There's the planetary timeline, there's the personal timelines. Of course, we're talking about the galactic timeline, we're talking about the universal timelines and so forth. So the only reason that we seem to experience or feel that we're experiencing an older timeline is that because we're still putting a lot of focus on our old operating system and how we do things, we're just recreating a lot of similarities of the inverted matrix, the inverted 3D, 2D part of it. It's not that those timelines exist. So a lot of times people say, well, you know, that destructive timeline, you know, because we did have multiple timelines. Some of the timelines were Armageddon. Some of the timelines were very destructive. Some of the timelines were what do you call it, an end to the human experience altogether. Those were all plugged in probabilities and opportunities, but those are all gone. So now for us to replicate a destructive timeline where, you know, humanity gets wiped out, or a large part of the humanity gets wiped out, or the planet blows up, or something of that nature, which is kind of all just created. The only way we could do that is we can simulate it to a certain degree if we're still projecting it within ourselves as that old operating system. But at the same time, everything else that's being transmitted will not allow us to plug that in a way where it actually has that as an outcome. But that's an agreed aspect from all of our souls that are participating here, and all our brother sister souls that are working very closely with us, that are not embodying physicalities and or not embodying our physicalities and so forth. So in actual fact, all the timelines have collapsed. They're all gone. They've all been merged and complete now. So you can create projections of probability as plugging in certain things and having certain outcomes, but those are just probabilities that are actually for you to simulate any of that, to actually plug that in, you would have to remain where the simulation started. That means in that state of consciousness, that way of interpreting energies and so forth that are within ourselves.
Okay, I'm going to slip in one from the chat.
Okay.
Okay. What are your thoughts on light language?
Light language? I don't know. What are my thoughts about that? Okay, so when we're talking about light language, we're talking about sound. So sound activates codes. It also activates certain spectrums of light, which is basically source consciousness. We have what we call full spectrum light, full spectrum consciousness, which is source, oneness, 0 point, all of that, form of creation. So when people use light language, and there's different light language because you have to be very attuned to the light language, because some of the light languages, that's maybe a lot less now. Some of the so-called labeled light languages actually still activated some lower frequencies. So you have to really be attentive to that. But in general, light language at this point in time activates more codes within ourselves, actually stimulates a lot of the dormant crystal states within ourselves, actually allows change to occur, because language or sound really is sound. And sometimes they seem like words or whatever it is, but they're not words, because words was kind of an interpretation of saying, okay, these sounds create this experience. That's a whole topic that I don't know when I will talk about that one. But at this point, when we're talking about light language, it does contribute to activate, stimulate, and encode different frequencies, different states of consciousness, different remembrance, and so forth within the bodies, the human entities, and the souls itself. So it does play a role in that aspect. So if you feel guided and you're, directed or streamed through you, just pay attention to how it makes you feel when those languages coming out. Because I've heard some light languages that actually are very inverted 3D, still streaming and so forth. Now that was a while ago, but so you want to be discerning when you feel that. Go ahead.
Okay, is this our last question maybe?
Close to that, yes.
Okay. I was told by one of my guides that my soul contract is for humanity. Do we have different contracts and purposes on this planet?
Yeah, I did cover a lot of that already in previous episodes and other questions. So just to go really quickly, souls do come here with certain agreements. Like my own soul made a specific agreement to come here to play a specific role. So some souls come here to be supportive through the journey and to experience the journey and to contribute at different points. Some souls make very specific to hold a specific energy, to bring a certain consciousness, and to actually be very instrumental, very powerfully to bring certain skill sets to advance humanity at some point. So there are souls that say, okay, I've come here to assist humanity, to stimulate, not to save, not to fix, but to stimulate what is already innate within ourselves that have gone in dormant state. It's like even this information is coming from my soul speaking to you at this point in time, that has come from an alternate universe that has already made huge advancements and so forth, and was instrumental, one of the main engineers and overseer of the retooling of planet Earth 15,000 years ago. So it came back very instrumentally to play and share this information. But it's really sharing this information to trigger within you the codes, the energies, and so forth. As many other souls are here to do all different parts. All of us play one role or another. So do we have other certain contracts, specific contracts? Yes. There are many souls that have come here with very specific contracts. Once they achieve the contracts, they have the freedom to leave. But they also still have the choice if they do or don't. And then if an agreement is held in place or a contract is in place and for some reason it becomes difficult and it's not supportive anymore, then you have the opening for that contract to dissolve. So Yeah, every soul has different purposes. It's either for just advancing itself, which is advancing the collective because we're all source, or play a very specific role. But many of the souls that have come here, even with that specific role, has to be integrated and experience the human experience to the degree so that it gets a good feel and understanding and connection to what the current human experience is, so that they will be much more powerfully and instrumentally to move forward. Go ahead.
Would you please go into more details about the groups who had a hand in altering our DNA besides hybrid reptiles and Anunnaki?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go there right now.
Okay. And the next question, I don't.
And the next question, I said I'm going to talk about that another time.
Okay, so
because those are biggies. They're both pretty heavy duty.
The one next after that, did you not answer that one as well?
Which one was that?
About the animal kingdom?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did answer that one at a different time.
Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Do souls have different levels of consciousness regardless of the level of consciousness to the human being whom they are embodied?
Yes, yes. So each soul accesses a certain level of consciousness, and that consciousness plays a role in the embodying part. So how can I give you as an example for that? Okay, so each soul making a choice will say, okay, I want only, say, let's go from 0 to 10. 10 is a pretty deep source awareness, meaning that I am source. 0 is complete disconnect of knowing itself as source. So we'll just say a disconnect, complete. So each soul that chooses to come here will decide how many veils it will have, how much access of source consciousness it will have, how much of it will use, because their souls do also reduce their access point when embodying a certain physicality on a certain playground. So there are going to be souls that have decided to come here that want to use higher levels of consciousness, but may start off with a very lower access. So they may start off with high access just to get a feel for it and then diminish it, because for them to integrate with the human experience and to get a deeper understanding of it, they can't use the full access of it or the full amount that it came in with, because it may not be. Because if you go right back to full source, it's hard to incarnate in a physical form, because you already see right behind it. So you can't, to create any form of realism from a playground is next to impossible. So that's why it had to diminish its access points. So they come in with different levels of access to consciousness before embodying, and then with an agreement to activate certain stages of access point. In my own self, the very first few years came in with very expanded consciousness, and then from age 4, or basically just before age 5, all the way till in the 40s, being in the 40s, age-wise, that it reduced 80% of its access points so that I could integrate the human experience. The 20% was already quite substantial, but at the same time, so there are many souls that do that. And then there are souls that are what you can call starseeds, or souls that are being coded to play a particular role, will bring in very specific levels of consciousness. Now, the consciousness is also not only the levels of consciousness, but consciousness that is may have certain specificness, probably made that word up too, specificness of a particular cluster of planets. For example, you can have a soul that may carry a lot of its consciousness as a Palladian or Sirian, or many other species that it carries along, that will come and say, okay, I will hold that energy. And usually the ones that are coming are one of the frequencies that make up our human physicality anyways. So they'll bring that level of consciousness. So that means all the experiences that they've learned and accessed, having those particular ones. And so it kind of works that way. I don't know if I've explained it properly. Okay. All right. Okay.
Do you want another question? But
That'll have to be the wrap up.
this will be the last one. Do you want the one next under it or the one under that one? Which one would you like?
Okay. So let's skip. Can you talk about the superconscious?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we'll go to
Okay.
the next one.
And then we'll still do the second one too? Okay.
We could. Let's see how long it goes.
Okay. Can you speak on gathering of super consciousness? As example, forming groups of people who are also walking the now path. Could you go into the higher aspects and their interconnectivity? So I guess what they're saying is, though, for those who gather that are on that path, what about their higher aspects and their interconnectivity? You know, I guess maybe how they're operating together as a group. That's what I gather from that question.
Okay, so when we feel drawn for certain people to come into our life, or that we start to congregate with smaller groups, and the groups could be in person, or sometimes the groups can be scattered in different parts of the world, but there's a different level of communication. And I'm not even talking about communication online, but we're talking about even communication, how can I say it? Communication in the sense of telepathic, and also communication because we have a connected direct channel. So there's a unification that's occurring where like-minded people, and when I say like-minded people, people that are at a certain vibration, that carry a very specific operating system, that can work with others, that create a powerful cluster. So when you're gathering and connecting people together, you're creating an even more powerful energetic unit. And this is why at times, getting together with people that kind of stimulate each other to advance and grow and to access, but then the like-mindedness actually creates even a higher level of consciousness because everybody has an instrumental key, carries a very specific signature or frequency code, and when those start to combine, it actually becomes like a much more powerful. And this is why it's, many more souls have been working together, human entities have been working together, and physicalities have been working together to actually access a more expanded capacities to affect the collective. So, and the thing is with that, we also have to recognize and acknowledge that there's going to be situations, circumstances, and so forth, where whatever group that you've given power to at some point in time, and when I say given power, attention and kind of collaborated with, you may be going to a point where that no longer aligns with you because you have moved forward, and that game or that connection that you had may not serve you, so you need to now shift to possibly a new group, a new gathering, new connection to actually bring things to another level. So sometimes we come into units, family dynamics or friendships or even groups, which you call spiritual groups, and you feel so much aligned with, and you're really working together and so forth, but then at some point it starts to change. So certain individuals start to leave, but you may feel like, okay, I don't belong there anymore. And that means it's because you're basically done with the role that you had to do there, and whatever that they were stimulating and supporting you with, you've outgrown. So now you move into a group that is more in alignment, and you move forward. So coming together with others, and this is what the online stuff is happening and facilitating, but more people coming together with like-minded, because this is going to be very instrumental as we move forward. And what I mean by that is that we are here to change our world. We are here to change our reality. We are here to change every system that we applied, every old belief, all the constructs and everything else. So a lot of the people that are in power right now are playing a particular role, even though it's superficial and illusionary. The shifting within themselves. Some will be participating, and some of them are just the bridging part of it, but there's levels of people that have to come together that already have access to this higher consciousness and already have a deeper remembrance of our true nature, our true human nature, our true design of our planet. So that's going to be instrumental for us in that access and bringing people together. So this is a lot of times why the groups get together and, they have, discussions and so forth. So there's going to be a new team that's already coming together in different parts of the world. And what the teams are groups of people that have, are advanced enough that can actually see this new world in its unfoldment and will help make decisions with the collective and will share with the collective of what will roll out to support us going into that new experience and new reality at this point, so that it fully integrates the organic matrix and our organic state of being. So that's how it works. I don't know if I've covered that well enough. Could you go into the higher aspects and their interconnectively? The other thing I wanted to mention is too, yes, that's a good point. We do also make connections, not only on the human physical form with other individuals that are, of course, souls are coming from everywhere. Human entities are, at different levels of advancement and so forth. But, there's new connections that we have, our brother, sister souls that are off planet, that are playing an active role to facilitate us and to be able to function in a way where you can create a shift. So the connections, the levels of connections and the movement from connections are much more accentuated and much more freely at this point in time. I think we're done. Let me just see how, okay, did we create? Yeah, we'll stop there. Okay, so this is just a couple of them that will go back, that we will build an episode on, because they're big enough that they're going to be a little bit time consuming and have to go into a lot more details to bring clarity to that. Yeah, okay, so that's that part. So we won't address any more questions. I probably have a lot more. I don't know how many we went through today. What number are we on?
I don't think it'll end. We're at 35.
Oh, geez.
So we have 81, but we keep adding stuff, and I keep building the list. So.
Okay. So anyways, we still have a lot. But like I said earlier, we will either cover it in a podcast, which will be video and audio podcast, that we're choosing to implement. There will be shorter things, and we'll address the different questions. And there'll be other opportunities where we will address more of those questions in following episodes. So we may plug in other episodes that would just go through a bunch of questions. Other ones will just get built into the episodes that we're going through anyways, because we, as we build the episodes, we plug in things that have been questioned, or there's a question related to it. So anyways, our next gathering of us coming together is this coming Saturday, and I do have
it and put it at the top.
Perfect. Okay, so this coming Saturday we have a meditation activation, global meditation activation. The focus is on empowerment and transformation, transforming our current dance of life. So it's very instrumental. So we did the other two, which was basically love and appreciation, and what was the other one? Love and...
It was empowerment.
Empowerment?
Oh, no, this is
No.
empowerment. The other was, first was love and appreciation. And then
Oneness, thank you. And now we're going into empowerment and transformation. So this is the third part of it. So share it with as many people as possible at this point in time for us to come together. So what we're going to do is we're going to link and we're going to go into that empowered state, and we're going to stimulate transformation, not only within ourselves, but collectively. There are many, many recipients all over the world that are waiting for us to come together to stimulate it, because they're doing all their parts, we're doing our parts, but when we unite, when we come together, we create a much more powerful force. And we're not forcing change, we're stimulating it. And it's already raring, ready to be lit up, the self-empowerment. Because self-empowerment is huge, specifically now. The focus is tremendous on the self-empowerment part. And then through self-empowerment, that's how we create transformation. So what we're doing is we're transforming our our current, what we call the current dance of life. And it's this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. We'll be transmitting on Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, LinkedIn, and also Twitter. Now, should we have any issues with Facebook, which the last two weren't an issue, then we will still have a link to go to YouTube. And if both fail, we'll have a link to Vimeo. But at this point, we're not anticipating that because we're getting a lot more support energetically for us to be able to come together. So join us this coming Saturday. And then the next episode after that will be Tuesday, and that will be episode 20. And we do have quite a few topics that we'll build around that. We also have a workshop coming up. Our intent was to do it on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of May. But it looks like because of certain things that are taking place, we may postpone it to the following week, which I think will be the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd. So the 31st of May, the 1st of June, and the 2nd of June. It's a 3-day part. Each one will cover different segments, because this workshop is to kind of work together to go through what we call the deprogramming, the clearing, and the empowerment. Those are the 3 stages. So the first 2 days, which will be the Saturday and the Sunday, will be very intense in the sense of going through this deprogramming part, and also the clearing part, and then going into the empowerment part. And then the 3rd day, which will be a shorter day, we will be addressing any questions and any additional support that's required. Now, this will be done in a sense where you'll be doing some work on yourself, because it will be we will work together, not only to support each other, but walk you through the different processes. And so we'll be doing processes on yourself to be able to kind of deprogram, clear, and empower. So that we haven't posted it yet. There's certain things we're still working on. Hopefully it won't get postponed any further than that. We'll see how all of it comes together. So right now, here we are. Saturday, our meditation. Next Tuesday, we do episode 20, and then we'll see what Thursday brings for us, and then we just carry on. And then we'll let you also know when we're doing the podcast. That is going to be also plugged in at some point soon, actually, because it seems like that it's necessary to cover all the topics we need to cover. So anyways, thank you again for coming together. Thank you for your support. We're open to for any financial support that you can provide as you feel do so. No expectations on our part. It just helps us to do our work. If you would like to check out the last workshop we did, the link is below in the description, and also the link for support is there, and also a link to bring you to Teachable, where we have many of our workshops there, and each of the workshop is specifically designed to help you walk through the different stages that you're going through right now. So thank you again, and until next time, go have a blast.